Good afternoon or good morning, depending on where you are in the country. And welcome to this noon hour webinar on careers in international law. My name is Chris Waters, and I have the pleasure of moderating this careers panel together with Hannah Diebold. Bienvenue au webinaire d'aujourd'hui que j'ai le plaisir d'animer avec ma collègue du Conseil de l'administration de la section canadienne de l'Association de droit international, Hannah Diebold. Hannah est avocate associée chez Blaney Murtry à Toronto et je suis professeur à la faculté de droit de l'Université de Windsor et chercheur en résidence au cabinet du juge avocat général, bien que je suis ici aujourd'hui uniquement à titre universitaire et comme membre de conseil aussi. Cette séance déroulera principalement en anglais, mais vous êtes invité à poser vos questions en anglais ou en français. So we're meeting virtually across Canada, and I would like to acknowledge that Indigenous peoples are the original occupiers, traditional stewards, and protectors of the lands and waters called Canada today. I would also like to recall that there is an international law dimension to what it means to have right relations in Canada, and here would note one of the provisions of the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples, which acknowledges treaties, agreements, and other constructive arrangements and the relationship they represent are the basis for a strengthened partnership between Indigenous peoples and states. The International Law Association of Canada is the Canadian branch of the International Law Association based in London, England, and founded in Brussels in 1873. With over 4,500 members worldwide, our collective objective is to promote the study, clarification, and development of international law. Our membership is global and diverse, and our members provide a full range of international law services to the state and non-state actors that shape our current socioeconomic, environmental, and political context. Comprised of legal scholars, legal practitioners, students, and policymakers, the ILA Global Network and its regional and national branches, like the Canadian one, contribute to the work of ILA research committees on important topics of international law. They also hold biannual conferences. The last one was in Athens, and the next one is in Vienna, Austria in 2026. I invite you to visit our website and join ILA Canada. And importantly, since I think many of you are students, membership is free for students as part of our effort to renew and replenish this valuable global network of international lawyers. You are invited to put your questions in the Zoom Q&A function. Hopefully we'll have some time at the end. And please feel free to pose your questions in English or French. I'll now turn it over to Hannah, who will introduce our speakers and ask the first questions. Hannah?
So I have the pleasure of introducing our esteemed speakers today. Sophie Rondeau is currently Senior Lead of International Humanitarian Law at the Canadian Red Cross. In the last 20 years, she has been a researcher, guest speaker, moderator, and lecturer in various Canadian universities, and she has worked in institutions such as the IHL Center, Rights and Democracy, and the Jean Pictet Competition. She currently lives on the island of Jojage, or Montreal, with her husband, 2 sons, and their dog. Welcome, Sophie. Kevin Gray is counsel with the Canadian government at the Trade Law Bureau in Ottawa, with a focus on trade and environmental protection issues, government procurement, and technical trade barriers. He works on international trade litigation and international trade agreement negotiations, including the Canada-US-Mexico Agreement, the Trans-Pacific Partnership, and the Canada-European Union Comprehensive Economic and Trade Agreement. Kevin has been with the Trade Law Bureau since 2005, having completed a number of secondments at various other departments during that time. He is an adjunct professor at University of Ottawa and Queen's University. Thanks for being with us today, Kevin. Payam Akavan is a barrister at 20 Essex in London, United Kingdom, the inaugural Human Rights Chair at Massey College, University of Toronto, an associate member of the Institut de Droit International. He was previously full professor at McGill University Faculty of Law, special advisor to the prosecutor of the ICC, and member of the Permanent Court of Arbitration. He has served as counsel and advocate before international courts and tribunals, including the International Court of Justice, International Tribunal for Law of the Sea, the European Court of Human Rights, and the Inter-American Court of Human Rights. Thanks for coming, Payam. Devdatta Mukherjee is a PhD candidate at the Schulich School of Law, Dalhousie University. She is a research fellow and a graduate research assistant at the Marine and Environmental Law Institute at Dalhousie. She was a Nippon Foundation Fellow at the International Tribunal for Law of the Sea in 2022-2023, and worked as a legal officer with the Asian African Legal Consultative Organization, which is an intergovernmental organization headquartered in New Delhi. Prior to that, she briefly taught international trade law at a university in India. Thanks for being with us, Devdatta. So having heard a little bit about our speakers, let's get into hearing from them directly. So our first question of the day is, what does your work look like on a typical day? And let's get this kicked off with Sophie.
Thank you very much, Anna. Thank you for the kind introduction and also for the invitation. It's always a privilege to be amongst colleagues, but also with you students to discuss what does international looks like when you practice it. And I feel like I'm very privileged to be working in that field. So thank you for creating that space. And I hope that this hour will be something that's useful, but also fun. So of course, I think we'll all have a similar answer. There's no one typical day, but I'll try to give you a few elements so you know a little bit more what it looks like. So as you mentioned, I'm the senior lead in the IHL team at the Canadian Red Cross. IHL is International Humanitarian Law. That's the law that applies in armed conflict. In my case, our work is domestic. So we work in Canada with stakeholders and different partners in dissemination, education, legal advice on the body of law in international law that applies in situation of armed conflict. I lead a small but mighty team of 6 people. We're spread across Canada between Halifax and Victoria. So my work is a mix of 2 things: provide legal advice, provide legal information and training, also being accountable for the deliverable because I'm a manager in the team. So there are twofold to it, and I'll dive a little bit into it in 1 minute. The part that's typical about my workday is sitting at my desk, any desk, whether it's in Montreal, Ottawa, or in an airport, opening the laptop, checking the emails, checking the cell phone, checking Teams, and seeing what's happening in the world. Canadian Red Cross is a humanitarian organization, so being supportive to our colleagues in operation is really key to understand how can I help? How can I be useful today? I already have a list, but things are always in flux. So checking your emails, opening your laptop, answering, checking in with colleagues, that's the typical aspect, and you do it day in and day out. And for me, that's the part that I like the most. Depending on the day, I might be giving a public-facing activity or conference like this career talk, lectures in universities. We also do training with the armed forces, so I could be doing it online, or I could be on the base in nice places such as Petawawa or Kingston. It could also be a day where I'm planning, so a lot of meeting, because you need to plan for those meetings ahead of time. So sitting with colleagues, with partners, organizing those events. A lot of my work is also managerial work. So from approval of budget to checking in with my team members to make sure that everybody's on board, and checking in terms of deliverables. So I do work in an organization that has AOPs and KPIs. This needs to be documented because we're an organization in a humanitarian format. So yeah, as a legal advisor, it changes every day. Yesterday, I worked from home. The day before, I went back and forth to Ottawa in the same day to attend a welcome gathering for colleagues at the University of Ottawa. So there's no one day that's the same as the other. And I kind of wouldn't want it any other way. So thank you for the question. I'm looking forward to hear what my colleagues, what their typical day looks like.
Definitely. Thank you, Sophie. Kevin, we're going to move to you next.
Sure. I beg to maybe differ with respect to the premise of the question being typical, because every day is quite different. Just to start off, I work in a legal service unit that provides advice to a wide variety of clients, and that ranges from all the departments, and then of course the center of government itself, in addition to the particular justice colleagues that I work with. So they're coming from various directions. And in addition to that, it seems that my day starts with figuring out what are the emergencies that are going to be dealt with. And currently there are quite a few in the international trade and investment space. And so often we're being asked to look at government communique, memos going up to senior officials, development of programs, legislative initiatives, But in addition to that, trying to balance time with sort of your longer term projects, which is dealing with, trade agreement negotiations, and they're ongoing, and there are always constant demands with that. There's litigation that's going on, and obviously the tempo changes as you approach deadlines. And then another big part of my job that I think is important is the mentoring. I mean, we work with lots of junior counsel. We're working with lots of students. We have a student internship program that I manage and I can talk to a little bit more about that. And in addition to that, I'm doing, I work with a lot of teaching, and that's quite preparing those lectures. And then finally, it's just a matter of communicating with the group environment, working with teams all the time. And therefore, it's lots of meetings, but lots of exchanges of information. And most importantly, working with international partners all across the world. So there's a real strong sense of collegiality.
Amazing, glad to hear it. And we're going to move to Payam next.
Merci beaucoup de m'avoir invité. Bonjour tout le monde. It's a very good question, and like my colleagues, it's difficult to answer because it depends on a given day, but a disproportionate amount of time is spent putting out fires. And I speak as someone who maybe has gone from being a UN prosecutor in The Hague to an academic and now a barrister in London. And the challenge throughout is you have the bigger projects, typically creative thinking about legal issues, and then, of course, drafting very complex documents, which at the end of the day are intended in the context of litigation to persuade a panel of judges. So in between emails and calls and the incessant daily interruptions, it's a great challenge to find focused time to actually do the work that we're really paid to do as counsel. Now, I would just say that one of the peculiarities of my work is that my clients are typically governments or victims of human rights violations, and that those are the subjects in international proceedings before international courts and tribunals. Working with governments requires immense amounts of patience, to put it very mildly, especially when you go to the global south in a country that is involved in a conflict where there is a significant degree of dysfunction. One ministry is doing something that is the opposite of the other. One ministry is simply non-existent. So you need to be very versatile, not a skill that we would easily learn in our Canadian bubble, if I may say. And another dimension, which is working with victims of human rights violations, is that you begin as a lawyer and you end up as a therapist, because you're really dealing with people who are deeply traumatized, who very often have very unrealistic expectations of you as the outside savior who, with the wave of a magic wand, can solve their problems. So I wasn't joking when I said you play the role of a therapist. Simply speaking with people with empathy and patience and compassion is a very big part of the work that you do, while at the same time trying to do what you can to give them what very few meager remedies exist in what is admittedly a very weak international human rights system. So that is a typical day in my calendar, staying somewhere in the boundary between sanity and insanity. Thank you.
And Devdatta?
Thank you for the amazing introduction, Hannah. It was very kind of you. After hearing the answers, I realized that my definition of a typical day has changed quite a lot. When I was working as a legal officer with the Secretariat of ALCO, my typical day had some elements from the answers, like dealing with uh, responses and requests of delegations of 49, currently 49 member states, and other requirements, and delving into the agenda items of the secretariat of an organization that was a tangible outcome of the Bandung Conference of 1955. That was a different kind of typical day. Right now, I have the pleasure of being a doctoral student at the Dalhousie University and working on my topic, Sustainable Governance of the Ocean Commons, where I essentially get to inquire into intercultural, interspecies, and intergenerational aspects of reconciling diverse ways of being, doing, and knowing. And against this theoretical, aspirational backdrop, I intend to study certain international legal instruments which have recently been negotiated or are currently being negotiated, particularly relevant to the realm of ocean commons. So, a typical day, the definition of it has changed quite a bit. And yeah, like each day is different from the angle of what I'm reading, what I'm getting to learn, what new things I'm acquainting myself with through perusal of documents or interactions with legal luminaries as well as peers. So that is a sort of typical day right now in the life of a doctoral student. Thank you, Hannah, for the question.
I guess it shouldn't be a surprise that typical day was a misnomer for many, or as you said, data ever changing, given the speed at which international law is changing in front of our eyes right now. So thank you all for speaking to that. And I did see a question come in for the Q&A, which we will address a little bit later on. But moving on to the second, what is a thorny issue that you are addressing in your work right now? And how did your experiences to date help prepare you to tackle this issue? So Kevin, I'm going to start off with you on this one. You're on mute there, Kevin.
I think that's one of the biggest challenges is knowing how to use that mute button. It's an interesting question. I think I'm going to speak from a thematic perspective based on sort of what's going on in the world, at least in relations to international economic law. And, I've spent a good chunk of my career building up the institutions, promoting the rule of law, putting stock in international and the commitments you make in international trade agreements, making the good arguments before WTO or international trade dispute settlement panels. And we've seen to have shifted quite a bit in terms of what that looks like. And there's a breakdown of these institutions, maybe a less of a engagement with the rules. And as such, it changes the role of the legal advisor. Now we're not necessarily trying to argue that things should be consistent, but now the advice we're being asked is to be more pragmatic. How can we mitigate any consequences? How do we address with litigation challenges? So the role of the council has changed quite a bit, and it is a bit disheartening, to be honest with you, because you work so hard to build up a system and then seeing it being torn around for many reasons. And so as the demands from our clients are different, and as a result, they're not necessarily asking us, is it consistent? They maybe presume there's some inconsistency, but they want to know how to manage it, and that's a much different dimension. And as a result, it's probably, from my perspective, a thorny issue that I'm dealing with on a conscious level.
Thank you, Kevin. And Payam, moving to you next.
Perhaps following what I said earlier, one of the challenges that I'm facing currently, which I faced on multiple occasions, is trying to explain whether to political leaders in governments or to victims who are mourning profound loss, just how limited their options are, and where their options exist, how slow moving the wheels of justice are before international courts and tribunals. So, for instance, I'm involved in a matter now, which I cannot disclose, but where under the compromissory clause of a treaty, which would vest the International Court of Justice with jurisdiction, there are all sorts of procedural preconditions, if you like, hoops that the government must jump through by issuing diplomatic notes and inviting the other party to engage in negotiations. And when you speak with political leaders, especially who are involved in a terrible war, who are constantly trying to put out fires to ensure their own political survival, it's very difficult to tell them, well, if you want to get before the court, it will take you at least several months. Or to simply explain to them that you can't just show up before the court without having accumulated a significant volume of credible evidence. So it's simply explaining what it is that you do as a lawyer and what it takes to succeed in litigation is perhaps more challenging than putting the actual legal filings together.
Can imagine so. And Devdatta, moving on to you. You're on mute, Devdatta.
Am I audible now? Yeah. So, following up on what I said earlier, one of the challenges that I face is in my attempt to reconcile these diverse ways of being, doing, and knowing. And such an attempt, I feel, from my previous experience of working at an organization that caters to its primarily developing country membership. Of course, developing country is now a heterogeneous group, is the problem of co-option and subversion of certain interests and issues that are reflected in the agenda items of various organizations. So, while reconciling the different perspectives, the diverse ideas of being, knowing, and doing, I have to be aware of that always. Also, regarding that, another thing that from my experience that helps me to tackle that is my acquaintance with the critical approaches to international law, 12 fourth world approaches to international law, feminist approaches to international law. So, an acquaintance with those approaches, along with certain in depth domain knowledge of the various branches of international law and their interlinkages that I gleaned while working at ALCO, as well as a Nippon Foundation fellow at the ITLOS, that actually gives me some guidance in attempting to reconcile those diverse ways. Because very uncannily, there are interlinkages, there are some kind of intellectual deja vus in ideas that came up in North America and certain indigenous perspectives in Asia. So those are very interesting things that I come across while trying to address that challenge.
Thank you, Devdatta. And Sophie?
Thank you very much. I enjoy preparing the answer to this question. I think it's something when you work in international law, when you work in a humanitarian sector, you always move forward and you never really take the time to take stock and saying, oh, what's the thorny issue? So for me, the thorny issue is to use my space and my privilege, because I feel I am in a space that's, I have a privilege and I have a duty to be the voice who those who need it, but I need to do it without jeopardizing or without putting in danger our access to the same people we're helping and also my colleagues. So in the Red Cross movement, the Red Cross, the Red Crescent movement, our modus operandi, the way that we operate is to have bilateral confidential dialogue and denunciation as a last mean of resort, because we have colleagues actually working in the field. So their security could be jeopardized if we take stance or if we're too vocal. So we need to get all the doors remain so we can access those people who need it the most. This is a space that is challenging to be in, working between operation and advocacy. I wouldn't want to be anywhere else. I feel this is very useful. It still is something that's challenging. And I think being uncomfortable, it's the first step towards success. So I enjoy being in a space where I'm not that comfortable. I feel that living in Canada, having all of my primary needs met, I can support that area of being uncomfortable and navigating that space and always keeping top of mind the people that I'm trying to amplify the voice and I'm trying to reach and support. I do with law, and I need to support my colleagues that are in operation. The second part of the question was, how did my experience to date help me prepare to tackle this issue? It might seem a bit lofty, but that's the answer that I came up with. I've learned throughout the years, you need to listen before you talk and you propose action. You need to read the room. You need to understand where you are being asked to talk, to act. A classroom will be different than an AGM for an NGO, or a house when you're invited to speak, or an annual conference. It's not the same approach. You might have the same discourse. My legal analysis will always be the same. I won't change it depending on the audience, but sometimes you need to change the way that you're presenting it for it to be respectful. You need also to be open to different point of view. That's what makes you a good lawyer. That's what makes you a good jurist, is to be open and being able to understand the arguments presented by all of the parties. Working hard really works. Being prepared, giving it your all, being super, prepared in what you're doing, knowing your values, and then being the voice of those that may not have the same privilege as you are. Always doing it with kindness. I think kindness goes a long way. For me, that's what always worked, and it keeps working for me in my environment. I think that's something that helps you navigate those thorny issues. Back to you, Anna.
Thanks so much. Yeah, when the landscape of international law is less stable as we're seeing it today, you all have highlighted how your individual roles, how others understand the law, the acceptance or rejection of different approaches, and access to the people who benefit from the law are all impacted. So thank you for bringing attention to all of those issues. On to the next question. This might tie into some of the experiences mentioned in the last one, but what do you most and least like about your job? So Payam, we're going to start with you on this one.
Thank you, Hannah. Well, in my line of work, I deal with a lot of violence and injustice. So that itself really weighs on your soul. And very often when I was teaching, students would have maybe a glamorous view of human rights work. It's anything but glamorous. There's a lot of suffering in the world. It's not only difficult to deal with that, but also to realize that you have to deal, let's say, with all the corruption and power games of the political sphere, how indifferent people in power are towards suffering and injustice, a very difficult reality to cope with. And then also, I would say in the legal profession, it's a very competitive profession, and there isn't as much empathy and courtesy as people should have towards one another. So it's something that we need to reflect on as well when we decide our career path. What kind of a person do we want to be? Not what kind of a career do we want to build? So this brings me to the best part of my career. I have, even though I've been in war zones and dealt with very terrible things, and that's taken a toll, I have met some of the most extraordinary and beautiful people of exceptional integrity, compassion, authenticity. And whether it's some survivor of a horrible crime that you have helped and brought at least some measure of comfort and justice to, or colleagues who are really deeply committed to the cause rather than their own ego. These are the people that keep you going, as in my case, after 35 years of dealing with a lot of nonsense. And I think the good and the bad come together. Each is there to teach you something. And I'll just end by saying one last thing. It's really easy to be idealistic when you're a law student. Much more difficult when you've gone out there and been wounded and seen the reality. So being cynical or disillusioned is no great accomplishment. It's defeat. So keeping your own integrity, I think, is the biggest challenge over the years.
Wonderful, thank you. Devdatta?
Hannah, I would say, like one thing I love about my current job is the independence it promises. So, of course, as a doctoral student, I have the independence of pursuing a chain of thought, pursuing some juxtaposition of ideologies that I want to pursue. And the least likable thing about my current job is are those moments when I become, as Pam said, I become overly skeptical. Like, is this actually going to bring any result? All this thinking and trying to turn those thoughts into actionable items. Like, is that going to bring any actionable results? And I'm particularly talking about the implications of the triple planetary crisis over the law of the sea and the international environmental law interface. So, but nonetheless, what I have realized that getting to know and overcome the divisive ideologies is one of the beautiful things that you come across while pursuing a, a higher degree or pursuing a study in a subject that I have devoted myself to, and identifying and reinforcing those strains of commonality for a sort of unified future to cumulatively and collectively face the crisis that we are facing. That actually looks very utopian and a lofty aspiration to pursue. But yeah, figuring out proper actionable items and pursuing those actionable steps is something that I have to think about.
Thank you. Sophie?
Thank you very much. What do I like the most? It's always the same thing, the people. I always like the most the people. I love being around helpers. I love being around the humanitarian sector. So for me, that's my favorite part in anything that I do, not just my job. So I discovered that about myself. As a student, try to find what kind of really what you like in your environment. For me, it was always about the people. I remember working in the corporate world. I liked it. I really enjoy my colleagues. I love working with great legal minds, but I remember seeing myself as a baby lawyer, hanging more with the kitchen lady than with the senior partner. And for me, that told me a lot about who I was, where I felt comfortable. And it was nice to know that about myself. I liked that I was in a corporate environment and realized one thing that I didn't like was being the weird one in a very straight environment. I think that right now, as a lawyer with the Red Cross, I may be the straight one in a very weird environment. And I love that. I love being kind of the person that brings the law, but also connects people. So for me, that's kind of the best part. And I've discovered that by trying different things, doing internship, volunteering, seeing things that I really like, seeing other things that I didn't like. So even if you're applying to something, you do it for 3 months and you're like, oh, I really didn't like that. That's success. That's awesome. You now know something about yourself as a lawyer, as a person, of where you want to be. I would have never known that if I didn't try it. The thing that I like the least, like Payam, a lot of violence, a lot of corruption, a lot of apathy also is something that's very difficult to navigate. When I took down the notes, the part that I like the least is that I still have a job. So in my field, being out of work would be a good news. We no longer have human rights violation. We no longer need training for humanitarian law. I can retire and raise puppy in a farm on the suburbs of Montreal. But that's not the case. So just having a job in itself is something that's a bit weird. So you need to do your work with a lot of humility. And also in French, I don't know if it translates pugnacité. Like you need to really, really push for it, but you need to be very humble about what you can achieve and what you can do. That's the part that I like the least, but it's also very motivating. The other thing, management for me is not my favorite part of my job. I'm a lawyer. I don't feel that I'm the best to do admin, reporting, process. Even being a boss feels very, very weird, but I'm really happy to do it for my team. So I feel like I'm an umbrella to make the most out of the people that I work with, to ask them, what do you love the most about your job? And let's push for that and let's allow you to do that. That's how I manage to do the managing part. I would maybe not do it for a corporate sector, but in the humanitarian sector, I feel very proud. And I like that I can kind of become a better manager for this team. So That's it for me.
Thanks, Sophie. And Kevin?
Thanks for the question. I like everything about my job, almost everything. I think the one that perhaps gives you no sense of pride and perhaps even a little bit of nervousness is, standing up before an international tribunal and saying the government of Canada's position is this, or going into international negotiation and saying, well, Canada believes this is. And to me, to speak on behalf of your country, speak on behalf of the public interest, to me is a very exciting part of the job. I think you really feel that you're doing some good, and you're also working with an international community that respects Canada and is always interested in what we have to say. In terms of the worst things about it, I think it's sometimes, and I think it's very common amongst council, is the feeling you can do everything. You can take on every task, and the volume of the work is challenging. And it's very difficult for me personally, maybe for other council too, to feel you need help of others. You feel you want to prove yourself. You don't want to help, reach out to other people. And I think that is, if anything, I think that is a flawed perspective. I think you have to be always considering the importance of working with others, the collegiality you get, the inspiration for new ideas, and also the humility that you may not be right. You may not have considered everything. And so from my perspective it's very important to reach out to others, try to prioritize responsibilities and obligations, and work with a great team. And I think working with a great team starts with communication, realizing where your strengths and weaknesses are, and exploiting the strengths and weaknesses of others to get a product which, from my perspective, you're trying to represent the strongest interests for the government of Canada.
Thank you, everyone. I guess it's no surprise that when you're dealing with the world's problems, it can be difficult and overwhelming, but also clearly very rewarding. And you all highlighted the importance of principle too. And to quote Graham, I think you said the kind of person you want to be is more important than the kind of career you want to build. And I think that speaks to what everyone else was saying too, about that will land you in the right place with the right people. So thank you, everyone, for talking to that. And on to our last standard question here before we move to Q&A. Any advice for students or early career practitioners just starting out? And this is anything from knowledge of how to get into the field to entry-level positions. And Devdatta, we're going to start off with you.
Thank you, Hannah. So, advice from a novice in the panel to the audience. So, my first point would be aspire to go beyond. So if you have found your calling in domestic law, there's no harm, or like one should not hesitate to venture into the domain of international law as well, as the domains are more mutually reinforcing than ever. Also, another example, if positivist reading of a thing suffices, there is it can do no harm taking a peek into the toolbox of critical approaches to international law, because you may find a tool that is going to reinforce your argument, or maybe you chance upon something that better aligns with your interest, better aligns with the line of argument you would like to pursue. The third thing in going beyond would be the need to acclimatize oneself with the ideas and insights from other disciplines, social science disciplines, science, because law does not operate in vacuum. And my second point would be the need to try to catch a glimpse of the minds of legal luminaries in the field. So that can be through an interaction with them. I have been very fortunate in interacting with several mind inspiring luminaries in the field of international law. It can be through perusing their work. It can be through attending events like this. ILA Canada is one of the platforms that continuously I have been seeing for the past almost 2 years now. Yeah, that ILA Canada continuously strives to create such spaces, and taking advantage of those spaces to catch a glimpse of the minds of legal luminaries, to get acquainted with the perspectives they're endorsing, their train of their thoughts, that can be very helpful as well. And my third point would be, as pointed out by Payam and Hannah, that to your own self be true. It's very important to know what kind of a person you want to be while you are pursuing international law. Being kind, being empathetic, being compassionate, these things should never come low in the priority. And also, Sophie pointed out the importance of hard work. So, these things actually help according to my experience so far.
Thanks so much, Devdatta. And Sophie, on to you.
Thank you. So the first piece, I think I've said it, be kind, listen, be prepared, and make sure that you invite yourself to every meeting you attend. So that's kind of a you do you, but not in a passive aggressive way. So kind of that idea of make sure that everything, your passion or your question, your place, make sure that you do that voluntarily and you think about it. I think that's super important. It's a good guiding. It's a feel good advice. More concrete advices that I may have, and that's listening also to my colleagues. Now I took a few notes. That's very, very technical, but decide if you want to do international law or if that's what you want to do is more live abroad or travel. Both are great, but they're not the same. I do international law mainly in Canada. It takes me to other places, but it's a different way. So do think about it. And even in the humanitarian sector, that's also something that you need to think about. International, it does not necessarily doing international work, and see what's your fit and give it a try. Do an internship, go to a conference, present a paper, see where you're the best version of yourself, and see what you like the most. See also if you're open to do any other tasks that are not legal per se. In my experience, doing those other tasks is the best way to allow you to really practice international law. So kind of being a little bit more flexible might allow you to be in that space where you really, really touch to the heart of it, at least from a humanitarian or maybe a human rights perspective. I think that's the best way to approach it and have the best toolbox for you to navigate that space. Do reach out to more senior people, but I would really encourage you to nurture relationship with your peers. They're your friends, they're the people you've studied with, and they're going to be your professional cohort. They're going to be your colleagues working with different stakeholders, with the government. And if you nurture those relationships, if you engage into interesting discussion, that really makes work more fun. It makes life more lively, and they grow with you. So one day you don't know, you think you're still young, but you're working with senior people, and these are your friends. And this is where you can actually get things moving a little bit more and move beyond maybe the apathy, maybe all of the negative aspect of the work. When you work with your peers, it's usually something that's useful. As a starting point and kind of hinting at the first question that would ask, what is the first step? For me, I really like academia, even though I work in an operational organization. I think it's pretty simple, although it's not easy. Read a lot, attend conferences, work with professor at the university, do auxiliary work, do TA work. It's super interesting to be in an environment where you can do that. Be on the organizing committee of a conference, jump into it and kind of see where you want to be. Not everybody has the chance to volunteer. Being paid is an important element. In international law, there's a lot of positions that are not being paid. And I'm a strong advocate for you don't work for free. But if you just want to attend a conference, write a chapter, support somebody, it will make for a great CV, but you'll get to know yourself better. Being a lawyer is something that you don't start when you're 8-year-old. You start a little bit later in your life. So find out who you are as a person and look at CVs of people that you really, really like. See where they study, see what conferences, what book they wrote, and you can reach out to them and say that you're interested. The worst that can happen is that they don't reply, but nobody's is going to be upset that you've reached out and you mentioned that you were interested in their work, and there might be amazing outcomes in terms of different projects.
Perfect. Thanks so much, Sophie. Kevin, on to you.
Sure, thanks. I mean, the first piece of advice is very simple. Just don't stress. I mean, there's a lot of pressure on picking the right opportunity and doing this and doing that, and you realize, have someone who's sort of looking back on a career, there's a lot of opportunity to have false starts and to do things differently and revert and pivot. And so don't really feel it's so catastrophic that you've made the wrong choice or you're not happy with what you're doing. And a lot of people's career paths, including many people on the panel here, have a very unusual career path. It's not just right out of law school and doing this and doing that. There's many different things they do. So my view is even taking your first position, don't view it as determinative of what your future is going to be like. I think the nature of the workplace is that people don't stay in a particular position for too long and they move around. So I think it's very important to consider that there's going to be lots of, crazy paths you're going to take, and those are all good. It's all for experience. And a theme of that is just diversifying your experience. I think one thing that I'm very envious of students today is there's so many opportunities at the law schools to do various things, either in the community or within the law school or even abroad, and take advantage of those opportunities if you can, because there's so many out there, and it'll just be a good way to sort of give you that experience that you need to make you a better person and more well-rounded person. In terms of particular activities, I mean, one thing that I think is very important from our perspective is try to do some mooting. Even if you don't want to do it, if you don't want to be an advocate, that's fine. But the mooting experiences puts you out there and get a sense of where your comfort level is. A lot of the people that work for us, and I run the mooting program at the U of O with respect to the John Jackson WTO moot, and every single mooter we've had have loved the experience. They've got to travel, they've got to moot before at the World Trade Organization, before appellate body members. They've met thousands of people, many of them gone on in careers in this area, starting from that experience. And so if you can do some mooting experience, I think it's a really good opportunity, especially, I mean, international law, as much as it can be a lot of solicitors' work, there is a lot of advocacy, and I think it's very important to get that skill set. And so diversity also includes internships, as someone else mentioned. I think try and get those internships. Unfortunately, it's not, they're paid and unpaid ones. And I think there's a little bit of accessibility issue for some people to doing those opportunities. But I took advantage of one doing one in Geneva at the WTO, and it opened up so many doors and opportunities for me. So I think it's good to do that. Another internship, and I'm going to sort of flag something that we have at the Trade Law Bureau. We have a summer internship program where we bring in students from all over Canada, as long as they meet their requirements, and they come in and they get an opportunity to do all the things I'm doing. They get an opportunity to be at trade negotiations, they get an opportunity to work with senior officials, and they get an opportunity to do dispute settlement. And that's a great opportunity. And if anybody's interested in that, I can actually put it, send it to Chris, and we can promote that in such a way. I think try and take advantage of those opportunities too, because there's just so much out there. And I think ultimately you're going to get to where you want to get. It's just about being a bit patient and realizing that you have a long trajectory in your career, and there's a lot to enjoy. So embrace that.
Thanks, Kevin. And Payam?
I would echo what Kevin has said. Take the scenic route, because having taught in law school, I realized it's a pressure cooker. It is so hyper competitive. You're all overachievers. You get into law school, then you have to kill yourself to get good grades, and then you worry about basically falling behind in the race. And it's really important to make a career an extension of who you are in a deeper person. As a deeper person, having said that, I would also add that international law is many different things, even far beyond what the members of this panel have presented to you. So we have everything from international human rights law to international environmental law to all sorts of other areas, international trade law, investor-state arbitration, a very lucrative field if you want to be billing 3,000 hours a year at a big firm in New York or London, and also a lot of international law now is part of domestic law. If you're involved in charter litigation before the Canadian courts, you will invariably have to know international law. And fortunately, we live in a jurisdiction where our Supreme Court is very open to comparative and international law. Just read some of the decisions of the Supreme Court in recent years, and then you will see what I mean. So you should really explore all the different areas that there are, and really through attending conferences and internships, what Sophie and others have referred to, get a sense of which speaks to you. It is, if you have a passion for something, you're going to perform much better. than if you enter a field of work just because of the prestige or pay, but you're absolutely miserable and you spend, 40 years of your life doing that. And I would also add, expect the unexpected as well. A lot of the most interesting opportunities I've had came out of absolutely nowhere. So if you put all of those together, I think you will have a pretty wonderful journey.
Thanks so much, everyone. I know it can be daunting to think about a career in international law because it's often less linear, but the opportunities are virtually endless and opening up. And thanks for highlighting that. So to all the students watching, don't sleep on any of the opportunities mentioned here today. But I'm going to turn it over to Chris to discuss some of the Q&A questions.
Thanks, Hannah. Yeah, I mean, this has been great. Looking at not only areas of practice, we talked about oceans law, trade law, and international humanitarian law, human rights law, but also who you're working for, who you're working with, civil society, academia, government, and so on. Different stages of career, and whether taking the scenic route or a linear route is the way to go. But I was also it was a real pleasure to hear about thinking of a career in international law as how you want to practice with integrity, with empathy, and so on. And that was really important for me, and something I think I don't often emphasize, and I should more. So thank you for that. So we've got some great questions for students, from students, or from participants rather. And the first one I'm going to highlight is from Jessica, who asks, with the world international order undergoing major changes, how do you think jobs in international law will evolve? Is it a secure future? And so we can get through as many questions as possible. Let's do it as rapid fire as possible. Payam, I'll start with you on that.
You give me the easy questions, Chris. I would say we're going through an extraordinary transformation in the world, and things may get worse before they get better. But I would say that international law will triumph in the end, even though we have these authoritarian, insular, ultranationalist forces. I think it's in part a reaction to the inescapable reality of globalization. And I also think that certainly in Canada, in Europe, these sort of insular ultranationalistic forces have actually pushed certain countries closer together. There's even greater integration, even greater emphasis on international law. And sooner or later, I think these, I can say in some respects, fascist leaders who are trying to tear down the global order will end up in the trash heap of history, because they will realize that you cannot unravel what we have built over 80 years since the end of the Second World War. And the only way, in fact, is to move forward with greater integration and more robust global governance. So it is a growth industry, international law. Don't despair. Don't look too much at the nonsense on your social media feeds, and just be on the right side of history.
Thanks. Devdatta? And if you want to pass on any particular question, just there's several, so.
I really don't think I have anything to add. It's like most comprehensively addressed, and it's always very important to be on the right side of history to realize what interests you are aligning with, and despair or not to despair accordingly. There
Thanks.
have been moments, like history has shown us, there have been moments like when despair was due, but international law has thrived and triumphed
Thanks.
and,
Kevin?
and emerged in
Oh,
new
I'm sorry, I cut you off.
oh,
I beg your
sorry,
pardon.
sorry.
No, it's my bad.
And emerged in new forms, like stood up to the occasion, metamorphosed accordingly. Thank
Okay.
you.
Thanks, Devdatta. Kevin?
Yeah, thanks for the question. Very happy to hear Payam's comments. I think I echo his optimism that things will improve, and there's a strong foundation that the international legal system is built, and it's very difficult to break that down. And perhaps we're looking at things too catastrophically, considering how much information we get about it. But at the end of the day, there's still a strong sense of international law, and it'll always be there. Now, with respect to the current situation, I think the one thing is it's create a growth industry, at least in my area. The amount of people that are interested now in international investment and trade law is astronomical. We're seeing a lot more people wanting to work with us. We're seeing a lot of people applying for internships. We're seeing a lot more people interested in the courses at the universities. And I think that's a good thing. A lot of people feel, wow, it's so topical. And I think that's an exciting motivation for people. I'm hearing about all these things, curious. I want to satisfy that curiosity by taking a course or even trying to find an internship opportunity. And I think we're in a moment of indirect consequences of what's going on because there's more interest in international law. And I encourage everyone to, there's always going to be a need for it. And we encourage new thinking. And I think the people coming from the younger generation is just going to keep on generating much stronger interest.
Thanks, Kevin. Sophie?
Yes. So humanitarian sector, no, not very secure, not very lucrative, but I wrote in my note, even more reason to be involved in that field if you have that privilege. I'm in a position where I think if I don't do it, who's going to do it? Asking my colleagues from the Palestinian Red Crescent or the David Magid Adam would be a bit too big of an ask. Even if I look at IHL, it was a smaller technical, mostly military community. If you look 20 years back, and now it's growing, there's a lot of exchange. So it still is a very dynamic community, not very secure. Monies are hard to come right now, but I have in my notes, resist and mobilize. That's where we are. Like holding down the fort for me is something that's meaningful, but it's a different path. It is the scenic route also. So thank you for that question.
And I think it's true that crises or challenges to establish legal order create work. I don't think I'm speaking out of turn when I say that the Office of the Judge Advocate General, which is the legal advisor on operational and international law, amongst other things such as military justice, there's a lot of really good folks working on important issues. So, okay, next question. I'm going to take a question from Théodore, and it's a question plutôt pour Maître Rondeau. Quelles sont les limitations du droit international humanitaire? Sache que ce n'est pas un droit contraignant. Comment arrivez-vous à overcome ce genre de difficultés lorsque, par exemple, le gouvernement ou l'État ne veut tout simplement pas respecter le droit international humanitaire et qu'en soi, il n'y a pas de mécanisme pour prévenir ce genre de situation? So essentially, what are how do you deal with compliance challenges in your work?
I'll answer in French, but I'll do a quick translation in English afterwards. Théodore, merci beaucoup pour votre question. Cette question-là de la mise en œuvre du droit, du dialogue avec les autorités, comment on fait dans notre travail? Eh bien, le message reste le même. Il faut trouver le momentum, l'endroit, les sujets, les interstices ou l'interlocuteur qui a la chance de porter des actions va nous écouter. Donc, il faut être réactif et proactif à la fois et revenir constamment sur notre ouvrage. Comme j'ai dit, le discours va rester toujours le même, mais la façon d'interagir avec les autorités, avec les personnes qui prennent les décisions, c'est là qu'il faut être extrêmement flexible. Et je vous souligne, sans qu'on fasse un cours de DIH, qu'il y a des mécanismes pour prévenir ce genre de situation-là. Ces mécanismes-là sont complémentaires et l'éducation, le fait de répandre cette connaissance-là fait aussi partie du mandat. So very quickly saying, I said the last thing that I mentioned is mechanism. They do exist. So the part of dissemination and education is super important, that we're open and we're there to actually share the knowledge for those who might not know about it. For stakeholders, for state that don't necessarily have a compliant attitude, I said that the message will always remain the same, but we need to be creative and flexible in identifying the moments, the places, the little cracks that you see where you can actually get the stakeholder to listen and move to action. So sometimes just a question of momentum, being there, being in the room makes all the difference. And if it doesn't work, then you come back to it and you don't quit and you kind of have a organizational or institutional support to the work that's being done.
Thanks, Sophie. Merci. Does anyone else want to jump in on that one quickly? Otherwise, we'll take one last question. So seeing no one desperate to jump in on that, I'll go to a question from Charlotte, who asks, what gaps do you see on the Canadian landscape for international law professionals? For example, does Canada need more researchers or more lawyers working for NGOs, more lawyers working for the federal government, or fact-finding commissions or educational programs? So where are the gaps in the Canadian legal international law landscape? Kevin, maybe start with you on that. Another chance to plug the internship.
Yeah, well, certainly plug the internship for sure. I think it's there are always needs for researchers, or I think it's also very important for there's going to need for people with litigation skills and strong writing. There's all those legal skill sets are there. I think one thing that I'm becoming more familiar with is how to be more technologically savvy. And I think the use of AI is going to be a very important part of it. And it's not so much it's going to replace you, but it's your ability to be comfortable with it and use it to your strengths is going to be really important. I think we're all, government generally is looking at how we can be more efficient and how we can do our job in a way that it's not duplicative. And I think if you can adapt yourself to the new working reality, I think it's going to go a long way in terms of becoming a more effective international lawyer. And lots of international organizations now are trying to embrace that. I know that, for instance, at the United Nations Convention for International Trade Law, they are looking at ways to use AI for the purposes of making submissions and providing arguments and helping the judges. And I think familiar with that is going to go a long way in making you more attractive in the workplace.
Thanks. I think to respect people's time, we'd better stop there, but I'm going to do something which I may regret. But there are a bunch of unanswered questions. I welcome folks to write me, and I'll respond the best I can, and I may reach out to members of the panel where I lack expertise, but I invite folks to reach out and write me at cwaters@uwindsor.ca, and I'll do my best to answer the unanswered questions. Many people register for this, which is wonderful. And so I want to thank you, students and participants who did register. And some of you are not students and ask questions about early career entry into the field as well, which we didn't get to. Again, feel free to write me. I'll turn it over to Hannah to thank our speakers.
Yeah, thank you so much to our esteemed speakers and all the students out there for joining us. The International Law Association of Canada is a branch of the International Law Association. We offer free membership to students, and assuming that you're all here because you have an interest in or curiosity about international law, consider joining our membership to become informed about more events like this one. We have another event in October, so be sure to check out our website and LinkedIn for more details and give us a follow. But that's all from us. Have a great day. Merci beaucoup and bonne journée.
Thanks, everybody. Merci.